Hi, everyone. Well, we have the pleasure of opening Expert 2021 with a household name for people that work in finance. Everybody that works in finance knows the name Bloomberg. And we have the pleasure of having Michael Bloomberg with us today to speak about his views on the world, about the economy, about the pandemic, about everything that is happening, about global warming, about the future, etc. I mean, from me, Mike, it's an honor to be with you.
Well, it's my honor. Thank you for
Thank you.
inviting me. I'm not sure I can satisfy what you just described. Nobody, including my kids, think that I know everything about anything. So,
But for me, Bloomberg is it's a part of life. Every morning when I get to work, or actually during the pandemic, I would stand, get out of my bed, go
well,
to
our
my
foundation says thank you because all of the profits from the company go to the foundation.
There you go.
So,
That's awesome. So I've been a client since 2001. That's what Bloomberg tells me every day. So
Well, the
my
company's-
hair is graying.
we're
fast.
about to have our 40th anniversary this fall.
amazing.
So, first product took about 3 years to get going. So, for 37 years, we've been selling terminals.
It's pretty amazing. And I also thank you very much for hosting us. This is the first time I come to the office. It, by the way, looks beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
used to come here about twice a month to do my videos on markets and stuff like
good.
that before all this hit the world. So congratulations on that, and it's good to see that you guys kept the common area so that people can linger.
I am a believer that the secret is putting people together, whether it's in a company or a family and everything in between. Anybody that thinks you can do it alone isn't very smart as far as I'm concerned, or can't do it very well. And the secret to Bloomberg has been the employees of the company and the fact that they work together. And so we've always had open plan, including the area you talked about where everybody meets for taking up food, snacks, that sort of thing. And we're going to continue that.
Sure. I'm going to get some cookies after this, so as I always do.
Cookies are good as my waistline, which I always struggle with, it shows.
Exactly. Well, they told me in Brazil that you had lunch with Guilherme Benchimol a few months ago.
I did.
Guilherme is the CEO. Well, he was the CEO. He's the founder of XP Investments, XP Inc., which is our parent company.
Right.
And our Brazilian audience has a very clear knowledge of his upbringing, how he came to build XP, which is an amazing entrepreneurial story. But I don't think many of our listeners know how you came to build Bloomberg. I mean, I've heard the story with 4 people, 1 coffee pot, and no clients. So
Well,
it would
the
be
way I
great.
describe it, I was born at an early age, and then everything else sort of fell into place. I grew up outside of Boston. My father made $6,000 the best year of his life. And so we didn't have any money, but I had a pair of loving parents and a sister who's 2 years younger than me, who lives just across Central Park from my house where I live here in the city. Went to public schools. Don't ask me how, but somehow or other got into Johns Hopkins University. And I went to study physics. And the first day I showed up, it turned out there was a requirement to learn to speak German. Why German? Because back in 1960, when I started in college, a lot hadn't been translated from all the physics done before World War II in Germany. 3 days in German class, I changed the engineering school. I was never going to learn to speak German, that much I knew. I went to Johns Hopkins, graduated as an engineer, and then went to Harvard Business School for 2 years. And then got a job on Wall Street at a firm, Salomon Brothers. Was there for 15 years until they fired me. It was a great experience. I loved every minute of it. Even the people that fired me were friends. It was time for me to go.
Yeah.
And firing's maybe
Actually, I
a
don't know if you
strong
know
word.
this, but Guilherme was also fired.
Well, okay, fine. Well, we
He
have
was-
a lot in
that's,
common.
that's
right
why
there.
that's why he started.
You know,
the whole-
sometimes you just need somebody to push you and
Exactly.
do something different. And then nobody called me to offer me a job, so I decided I would start a company, and I knew something about technology because when I was at Salomon Brothers, when I was running the equity department, the trading facilities, I realized that computers could give us some information, so when a customer called with a block of stock to sell, that would help us get together, buyers, sellers, know what the company is, understand the risks. And I started building a computer system for him at night there. And so when I left Solomon Brothers, I thought to myself, we have all these screens on desks that show prices, whether they're bonds or commodities or stocks or something. And there were two very big companies, Telerate and Reuters, that had these screens. But what occurred to me is they never stopped to think why people wanted to look at those screens. And you say, well, it was to see the prices. Okay, but what were they going to do with it? Why did they need that information? And I thought to myself, well, maybe they'll want to draw a graph, maybe they'll want to make a table, maybe they'll want to send a message, maybe they'll want to do a calculation, maybe they'll want to offer people some transactions. And they weren't focusing on that. So I decided we'd start a company, and it started, as you said, with 3 other guys who had come out of Solomon with me. And we started to build something that would take that information, which was already there in machine-readable form on these screens, put it into a computer that it had come out of a computer, but put it into another computer where you could do some of these things. And nobody thought there was a real value in that because everybody would do things on their own. They didn't need computers to do it. It was an old outcry methodology of these stock markets and bond markets that have grown up. Some of them were these open outcry markets, like the commodities markets. Some were done on the phone. A few were done by teletype to Europe if you did any business in Europe. But nobody had thought there was any value to having them in a computer, and took 4 years maybe before they figured out, oh wait, maybe there is some value. But by that time we had what in America we'd call first user advantage. And we were way ahead. And there are people that catch up in some areas, and we've got to keep making our product better and to more customers and do it faster and more accurately and reliably and all that sort of stuff. But nobody's caught up yet, at least in a macro sense. And as soon as we think that they're not going to catch up, that's when we're going to get into trouble. And that's the real challenge a company like ours has. We've been very successful, but you've got to keep running. And the more successful you are, the harder it's going to be to keep running and to stay ahead. Because you're more of a target and others have had time to sort of get closer. So that's the history of born in February of 1942 in Boston, and here I am in whatever month this is, August of 2021.
Well, what strikes me the most, and it's the same thing with Bezos, for example, Jeff Bezos. So Bezos had pretty much the same job I have, which is a very comfortable job. You make good money, you can live very comfortably, but then you just try your own thing. Do you think that that's just basically how some people are? And
well, I
don't think everybody's built like that.
I don't know. I know Jeff very well. He's very driven. He had an idea of selling books, and out of his car he drove around and delivered the books. And today they are ubiquitous is his understating what Amazon and Prime have done. But he's a guy who gets an idea and he just does it. And he's interested in a lot of things. For example, space. He's got his own rocket and that sort of thing. Family life that people talk about all the time. But when he focuses on getting a job done, he really concentrates, and he demands explanations as to why something would work or doesn't work or whatever. And he surrounds himself with people that are doers, would be a word we would use. I don't know if it translates, but just, okay, I hear you talking. What does it mean? And how are we going to use it? Tell me that. Just let's jump to the end game. And he's a guy who, I've always thought, jumps to the end game.
So you built this whole thing, and then you decided to go into politics. I used to live here in New York when you were mayor.
Oh, good.
And one of the things that I honestly think New York reached its best time, its best moment, when you were mayor.
Well, you're nice to say so, but not everybody agrees with that.
But crime was very low. unemployment was very low.
Well, today everybody likes me. When you're dead, they like me. When you're out, when you're gone, you don't have to be dead, but you have to be gone. And then people remember the good parts, and most don't remember the bad parts. But we certainly had plenty of problems. And when I got the reason I went into government is I've kept listening to people say, "There's no solution to that problem. You can't deal with homeless and make people's lives better. You can't educate kids better. You can't bring the crime rate down. You can't improve the environment for culture, and you can't for people to get jobs." And I said, that's not true. I think you can do some of those things. I think there are solutions to all these problems. Generally, the reason they don't get implemented, the solutions, is politics.
Yeah.
So we know how to educate kids. It's the politics that don't let you do it, or you don't want to do it. We know how to improve life expectancy. It's the politics.
Yeah.
Obesity and smoking are the two things that kill you.
Yeah.
Okay? Everything else is so far down the list. And so a lot of people made fun of me when I put in the smoking ban. Today, almost nobody smokes. This is really caught on. Obesity. Full sugar drinks they just have a lot of sugar. And if you could just get people to drink something that's not quite as sweet, you will help people control their weight, and they will live longer. There's just no question that these things work. So anyways, I decided...
Plus COVID won't kill you.
We know how to stop COVID. We're just not doing it. It's the politics of it. That's just a very good example, incidentally, I think.
But one thing that I found pretty amazing when you were mayor, and I don't know if it's a difference in times or what it was, but you were able to have a business-friendly administration, because your administration was very business-friendly. I mean, you said it.
If people want to have a life, they've got to have a job that pays, and that's what business is all about.
Exactly.
So, people keep thinking life is either or. Life is not a zero-sum game. Yeah. If you have a good economy, you then have the wherewithal to help people who aren't as lucky as you and I. If the economy slows down, you don't have the money to try to improve the school system, improve public health, have more cops that are better trained and better managed. All of those things. It all depends on getting things done, and we know how to do it. It's just somebody's got to be a leader and pull people together. And if you take a look, in America, the Republicans and the Democrats are battling each other all the time. We need somebody to pull them together. And our president said that's what he wants to do, and he's only been in office for 6 months or so. So, it's much too early to see whether he can actually get it done. It's a heck of a challenge, and it's not going to be easy. And he's not ever going to get everything done, but he can make a difference here, and we'll see whether he does.
Infrastructure is looking good, so hopefully that will be bipartisan.
Yeah, but okay, keep in mind, infrastructure is something. I'll tell you a good example. I was mayor for 3 terms, 12 years, and people say, "Oh, you did so much in your 3rd term." That's just not true. Most of the things that we delivered in the 3rd term were started in the first or the 2nd. And so if Congress is going to pass a bill to do something in infrastructure, I'm not sure what infrastructure it means. If you look at all of the things in there, they're all politically picked, not the things necessarily that we need. And it takes an enormous amount of time. If you want to build a new railroad, people always say, well, look, the Chinese have these ultra high-speed railroads, and so the Japanese and whatever, but they always talk about China. Yes, you could build one of those, but just the legal challenges to get the land to put it on will take you 10 years.
Exactly.
Okay, so, when they say, people think, oh, well, there'll be lots of money. Yes, they'll distribute the money, but the money will be spent on other things that we don't really need, and certainly not on long-term big projects. Why? Remember, the elected official who votes for a long-term project gets all the grief from the people that don't like the project and all of the aggravation for the people who have to pay for it. and he's not even going to, or she is not even going to get invited to the ribbon cutting when it's delivered. He's going to, or she's going to be all out of office, and nobody's going to remember him. And who's ever the mayor or the governor or the president then certainly doesn't want to share credit with somebody that they've never met before. Come on.
One thing that keeps on worrying me, because I think it's a sea change compared to when I was younger, is that if you ask a millennial...
Well, my standards, you still are.
If you're a millennial or a Gen Z, if I'm not mistaken, just Gen Z person, 60%, more or less 60% say that we need an economic system other than capitalism. And I think that's a travesty. And I know you gave a speech at Harvard Business School about 2 years ago when you spoke about this issue and specifically how we need to make the market economy work for youngsters.
Well, it's fascinating. We've tried many different systems in our history, and the results of most of them have not been good, but capitalism sort of works.
I know.
Capitalism, and I'm certainly not in favor of capitalism without checks and balances, and the government has a responsibility to ensure there's fairness and disclosure and openness and all of those kinds of things. But capitalism is people doing what they want to do. And if you do it and do it well, you can enjoy it and share it with others, and that gives you an ability to make money, to invest. Socialism didn't work out any place that I know of. And you take a look at Brazil and Venezuela and even Argentina. These countries are not in great shape.
No.
And America, for all of its problems, when people vote with their feet, they come to America. They don't leave America. And the reason is they see opportunity. So you've got a young couple and a kid, and they've got to struggle to get into America and that sort of thing. But they think that they will be able to provide for their child better in America than any place else. We certainly still have our problems. I'm not making light of it. But if you just look around the world with an open eye, you'll see dramatically better here than elsewhere. Now, there are other countries that have done well. The UK, for example, a lot of the EU has done well. There are countries in the Caribbean and in Latin America that have done well, and in Africa, but and certainly in Asia. But it's the system of letting people who want to work hard succeed is something that is a model that has been tested compared to all these other models, and it has won out every time.
I know, big time. But what do you think we should do as stakeholders?
There are no simple solutions to complex problems. Yeah. If they were, we would have solved them.
So now moving to ESG, because you're...
everybody's moving to ESG.
And that's great. That's, by the way,
I think it is. I think you don't necessarily need a movement to do the right thing. We probably should have done it all along. And we have done it to some extent, just not anywhere near as much.
Yeah. But I got to tell you, I hosted a panel with BlackRock the other day. And so I have had to learn about ESG the last year as if it's a rocket. But it wasn't like that. And I honestly think this is a very good thing that it's happening. And Latin America is going this way. Like, for example, Colombia is going to issue green bonds next week, etc.
I just hope that it's not a fad. We need some substantive things where you really change things. That's only going to happen if you do something that includes everybody. If all you're going to focus on is one group, the rest of the world or country or city or state that has to fund it or provide those services, they have to be part of it too.
That brings me to global warming as well, because I know you've focused a lot of your time on that. There was, I think 2 weeks ago, The Economist had a leader on global warming and talking about the 3 degrees.
Story.
That was a dire article. That wasn't a positive article.
Well, there was a study out today by a bunch of scientists If you really want to worry about something, I won't live to see it. You probably won't live to see it, but your kids and grandkids for sure will. And that seeing it is what you're starting to see now. Every day now there's floods and tornadoes and fires and
the turkey thing is incredible.
Well, in California, the biggest, I think it's the second biggest fire we ever had. Still burning in California. They can't put it out. Turkey certainly has a problem. Greece has a problem. You look at the floods in Germany, where the rivers, I don't know which river it was, but just, took out it's enormous amount of water. We have more storms. They move slower, which means at any one point in time they dump a lot more moisture and wind and do damage. And then other places we just are lacking in water, and none of the models say we're going to get it back. And all of the science where we used to talk about 2050, we have to do something by 2050, forget about what it is. There's nobody in office in politics today who's going to be in office in 2050.
Exactly.
As a matter of fact, 3/4, maybe even more than that, of the people alive today will not be. It's got to be much higher than 3/4. Will not be alive in 2050. So when they promise, the company promises we'll do this by 2050, or the government promises, shame on them. We shouldn't allow them to get away with that. There's just no. That's ridiculous. With the numbers we used to use for 2050, then went to 2040. Today they're coming in at 2030. Things are worse today than they've ever been before. There was a study out today, the hottest in 125,000 years and things like that. I mean, the oceans used to be 10 meters higher, which means a lot less land for us to live on. And today they're starting to come back up. The storms get their energy from oceans, so temperature of the oceans is really important. And all of this is man-made. There is no question about it. The science is there. You can measure the pollutants coming out of the ground, out of the factories, out of your car, out of the mines, whatever. And if we continue to do this, just the daily stuff that you read about in the paper every day of these fires and storms and whatever are just going to get worse and worse and more of them every day.
Do you think, like for example, I'm sure you've seen that webpage, so you do your carbon footprint, and I did this before the pandemic, and I used to fly every week, Mike, so it came really, really bad, and I felt so bad that I actually financed the planting of 3,000 trees. In
Trees
Colombia.
are helpful. They store energy,
but
store
honestly,
carbon, or store pollutants.
Honestly,
CO2.
I'm on that. I'm kind of like on the because I also do a lot of reading on this. I don't see much alternative other than doing some geoengineering.
Well, number one, nobody knows whether geoengineering is going to work. It'd be very scary to put stuff up in the atmosphere deliberately, and supposing you're wrong, you could destroy the whole planet, okay? So let's not get too carried away here. And nobody's come up with science yet for carbon capture, at least in a commercial ways. You can, in a test tube, yes, but not much more than that, although they're working on it. And, and then if we have a new kind of energy, fusion, might be one of the solutions down the road, although the joke there is it's 10 years away, and it's always going to be 10 years away. You can do some things. We have closed in America 60% of the coal-fired power plants that we had 5 or 6 years, 7 years ago. And by 2030, we should have virtually all of them closed. That's the good news. The bad news is in China, while they've cut back how many new plants, they're still building more power plants every year than we've ever had in America in any one year. So, it's just, you got to get China and India. Russia has all of the permafrost. As it melts, out comes more methane, makes the whole problem worse. You can look at the ice caps melting, enormous reduction in the amount of ice at the North Pole and the South Pole. The next thing after coal is natural gas. leaking out methane
Yeah.
of old coal mines and old gas pumping, whatever you call them, mines, drilling sites. And we're not doing anything to stop it. And then something like India, they're talking about in India making all cars electric. It sounds great for your ESG score. One minor problem is they generate all their electricity with coal.
Yes.
So if you went from gasoline, which isn't great, but isn't as bad as the coal, you're going in the wrong direction.
Exactly.
You know, so once again, I come back to it. We know the answers. It's all politics, and you would have to get somebody who can get other countries to pull together and get leaders in those countries to push the people. There's the old, you know, I know it's going to happen, but I don't want to make a sacrifice today. Well, what about your kids? Yeah, I worry about my kids, but you come back, you're not willing to make the sacrifice today.
You're not willing to change your Range Rover for a smaller car for that.
Although there are some people, a lot of people, you know, Elon Musk has really changed the world because the electric cars, Tesla, once that was proven to work, now every car company is going to make electric cars. But it was Elon Musk that did it.
Yeah, which by the way brings me to the next point, because Bloomberg is on track to be net zero by 2025. So
right.
You're voting
us,
with your feet.
Yeah, okay, but keep in mind, we have solar panels in Princeton, New Jersey, near where we have a big campus or collect all our data down there. And we can make investments in people around the country or around the world that are willing to put up solar plants and buy that and put it in. So we can come up with it, but we weren't one of the big polluters.
Yeah.
You know, it's a computer company or an information company or whatever. It's not a manufacturing company that would generate a lot of stuff. We fly around the world and we drive to work and we do all of those things, so we can make some differences. But it is, in all fairness, easier for us to say an attainable goal by 2025. It's also close enough that you and I might live long enough to see it, and to be held responsible if we promised it and didn't deliver.
Exactly. But the whole point being that, in a way, because of, again, from a politician standpoint, you know, what have my grandkids done for me lately? So that type of mentality is just very, very hard to
my two grandkids are 6 and 7, so not a lot lately. Yeah.
But the private sector needs to. I mean, to me, I mean, the consumer forces the private sector to become conscious.
Closing coal-fired power plants, we closed 60-odd% of them. Why? Bloomberg Philanthropies funded something called the Sierra Club that actually did the work, and they convinced employees of power companies to say, I don't want to work here if you're going to pollute the world. They convinced the customers, I don't want to buy your energy if you do that. And they convinced the investors, and that's why the ESG scores force people. So the coal companies have closed and switched over, a lot of them, to renewables, maybe because they think it's right, but really at the same time because they're getting pressured from employees, from customers, and from investors. And that's another good example to come back to your question about capitalism. Capitalism works. The public has a say if in capitalism. The public does not have a say in socialism. In socialism, the government decides. In capitalism, if the public wants something, they will vote with their pocketbooks. And that is the incentive for other people to behave differently and companies to behave differently.
Mike, this is I could speak to you for hours and hours, but this is my
No,
last question. This is my last question for you.
I got to go to work.
I know. Quick question on an easy, difficult question on Brazil and LATAM in general. Because it's a two-part question. Brazil, Colombia, Chile, Peru, every single place in LATAM is seeing the same thing that the U.S. is seeing, which is very, very strong partisanship. I love your comment when you say that one of the things that struck you the most is that in the cafeteria in Congress, Republicans only have lunch with
That's
Republicans colleagues, and Democrats only have lunch with Democrat colleagues. That it was different before. I remember that it was different.
It was, and I think the biggest difference, because a lot of things that we say it was different before, and if you look back, they probably were. Not everything, but most. The difference is, when I look around, what has changed? Why is this? And I would argue it's social media. Social media has changed the way we distribute information and the way we think and what we do with the information we have. And so people can influence you even if they don't have any expertise. Now, there were always people who talked on television, let's say, as a medium, that didn't know what they were talking about. But generally speaking, there was some credibility you had to have to get on television, including science and literature and history and all we learned from putting those together. Now you can get on there without any of those things. So you have people that saying, "Oh, the virus is not going to kill you, and don't take any vaccines." And there are people that don't want you to get vaccinated against measles and mumps and smallpox and polio and all of those kinds of things. That wouldn't have happened before because the only information you would have gotten was from people who understood science, at least to some extent, and we gated that. We made sure the networks had some credibility. Today, we went from somebody deciding what you should read and what you should know for you. You can say, I don't like that, but you have delegated that to people when you read a newspaper. Because there's somebody that decides what stories are in the newspaper you read and how important they are, how big the headlines, where they're placed, all that sort of stuff. And you say, well, I don't like those views. Okay, you can go to another, what we'd call a front page editor. It's called another newspaper, and you can get a slightly different view. That's the way all the information you ever got was decided by somebody else. And they decided what was in your best interest and sent it to you. Fast forward to social media. How do we select what information you get? Well, it's all there, but we have to order it because somebody has got to figure out which pieces of information you get. And where does that come from? It comes from something called crowdsourcing. Mm-hmm. So you say, I'm interested in, you answer an ad, I'm interested in Pampers, diapers. All of a sudden you get bombarded with ads for products that somebody with a newborn would want to buy. If you click on a story that talks about baseball, you will get lots of information about baseball as a sport. If you pick something that on left or right wing politics, you will get lots of stories. So the TV networks get more and more compartmentalized and less willing to share. Why? Because it's all done by a computer. And when they say, oh, no, we really pick and choose, that's just total ridiculous stuff. The whole network of social media is built on the ability to know what you want and to feed you more of it, because then they can sell you more products. And it's not necessarily bad, you might like all of this, but that's the fundamental difference in our society today versus 20 to 30 years ago or before then.
I agree 100%.
And it's my explanation anyways of why things are as polarized as you described in every Latin American country and certainly in America as well.
Exactly.
And in Europe, you saw the Brexit, conservative, liberal, fighting back and forth, and it's true in virtually every country. What do you do about it? I don't know. I worked for 12 years in government, thought we did a half-decent job. Not my problem now. Somebody else has got to figure out this, and we need leaders in each of these countries that can pull people together rather than polarize. And it's hard to get them elected, and it's hard to find them, but I would argue they do exist, and we have a history in the world of having people that pull people together. We've also had exactly the reverse.
Yeah. One final one. If you were able to give one piece of advice to Brazilian politicians and business people, etc., how to make the next 20 years winning ones for Brazil. What would you say?
I'm not sure it's true, but I hope it is true that the public listens to what you say as an elected official and can get over the fact that it might not be what they like, but they can sort of believe it is what we need. And it takes a strong leader and just the right combination of votes to get into that position and to be able to survive doing it. And then eventually you build and people say, oh, yes, 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 I was always there. But it's almost an accident. It's just got to be the right people at the right time, the right opportunity. They make one decision and it turned out to be the right one, and so it's up on the scoreboard. And then, well, if you've won there, then we'll listen to you again. And if you get 2 or 3, then all of a sudden you really can predict the future, and we'll ride with you. But I've always believed, tell the public the truth. I tried that for 12 years. I got elected, and a year later, I raised taxes dramatically in New York. Why? Because we were losing cops and firefighters and teachers and nurses and sanitation workers and whatever. We couldn't pay them. Yeah. And I said, if you want to have your streets clean and safe and be healthy and all, and your kids to get an education, we have to do it. The money's got to come from someplace, so I'm raising taxes. My polling went down to negative numbers like nobody's ever seen before. 2 years later, I got reelected running away and got reelected twice after that, or once more after that. So
tell the truth.
Tell the truth, and better to go down in flames having done the right thing than keeping your job and being a hypocrite. And unfortunately in government, an awful lot of people in government have no other careers. They've never worked in industry, never run anything. So to put them in charge just doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what we do. We elect people because they look good or speak well, and not because they've shown they can run something. And all of these jobs are executive jobs. Even in Congress where they write legislation and places like that, you still have to understand what's going to happen, the results of what laws you pass. And it is very hard to stand up to the pressure of saying to the public, I know you want this, but no. And they scream at you, we're going to vote for your opponent. Okay. Rather go out that way than go out the other way.
Mike, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much for taking the time on behalf of XP. It's
happy to do it. You guys are valued customers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Want to make you a bigger customer.
We will become bigger. I can assure you.
I'll tell our salesman. All the best.
All the best. Okay, that was an amazing conversation with Michael Bloomberg. You saw all the comments, all the knowledge that he has, all his experience. I found very, very, very amazing all his views on polarization and what the future holds in terms of global warming and ESG. So it was great. Thank you for being with us. And one household issue, very important. Remember that you need to choose your stage going forward so you can keep on enjoying Expert 2021. Thank you very much.